Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. We got Joe Rogan learning that $100 million was spent by the Democrats during the election cycles on activist groups. This is very, very interesting. I've touched on things like this before. I've touched on George Soros doing things like this in regards to the pro-Palestine movement. Not everybody, but he did have a hand in it a little bit. I've also covered it in a video that I called Klaus Schwab's, or the WEF's, 5 Pillars of Control, because civil societies is actually one of them. So I'm going to break that down. I got a clip from an old video that I made, but let's start with the Rogan clip and let's expand from there. $100 million spent on activist groups. To do what? We'll talk about that after. Let's go.
Right, and now we probably will now with, this new administration is probably going to carve all this stuff open. But look, it was a pattern. And then look, the companies bear a lot of responsibility, and the people in the companies, made a lot of, I think, bad judgment calls. But the government, the Biden White House was directly exerting censorship pressure on American companies to censor American citizens, which I think, by the way, is just flatly illegal. I think is actually subject to criminal charges. I think there are people with criminal liability who were involved in this. So there was that. There were also members of Congress doing the same thing, which is also illegal. And then there was a lot of funding of outside third-party groups that were bringing a lot of pressure down on censorship.
Yeah.
And just an example of that is there's a unit at Stanford, right next door, to us that, was the Internet Censorship Unit that was funded by the U.S. government.
Wow.
And exerted tremendous pressure on the companies to censor. And it was very effective at doing so.
Does it smell like sulfur when you walk those halls?
It is very dark and grim. This whole thing is very bad. And so
Stanford.
Oh yeah, Stanford. Stanford, by the way, another unit like that at Harvard. A bunch of universities got pulled into this. A lot of NGOs and nonprofits got pulled into this. And so the Twitter files showed us kind of the basic roadmap. And then there's this thing called the Weaponization Committee that Congressman Jordan is running that has also revealed a lot of this. But I would imagine the new Trump administration is going to come in and carve all that wide open. And I know that there are people being appointed to senior positions who are very determined to do that.
One of the things that I found really kind of shocking was when they revealed how much money the Democrats had spent on the election and how much money was spent on activist groups.
Yeah, right.
It's like more than $100 million, right?
Yeah, there's extensive government funding of politically oriented NGOs.
Yeah,
NGO is one of those great terms, like non-governmental organization. All right, like what the hell is that?
Right. What is that? Tell me. I don't know.
Well, it's sort of a charity, but what it really
it's
sort of, but most of the time it's a political entity. It's an entity with a political agenda. But then it's funded by the government in a very large percentage of cases, including the NGOs in the censorship complex, like the government grants, National Science Foundation grants, like direct State Department grants, right, direct money. And then, now you've got an NGO funded by the government. Well, that's not an NGO.
Right.
That's a GO.
Right.
Right. And then you've got a conspiracy, like with censorship, then you have a conspiracy because you've got government officials using government money to fund what look like private organizations that aren't. And then what happens is the government outsources to these NGOs the things that it's not legally allowed to do.
Like what?
Like censorship.
Okay.
Like violation of First Amendment rights. Right. The government. So what they always say is the First Amendment only applies to the government. The First Amendment says the government cannot censor American citizens. And so what they do is, if you want to censor American citizens, you're in the government. If you're smart, you don't do that. What you do is you fund an outside organization and then you have them do it.
Boy.
Right. And that's what's been happening. Right. And
that's like hiring a hitman. Like, it's not okay to murder someone, but you can hire someone to murder someone and then you're clean.
Yeah. And if you want to solve a murder, it's not enough to find out who the hitman was. You have to find out who paid the hitman. Right.
Right.
You want to work your way up the chain. And so a lot of this traces into the White House. The best defense the companies have is that a lot of this happened under coercion. Right. Because when the government puts pressure on you, like it might be a phone call, it might be a letter, it might be the threat of an investigation, it might be a subpoena. It could take many forms. But when the government does that, it carries, that's a very powerful message. It's like a message from a mob boss, right? It's like, don't you want to do me a favor? It's like, yes, Mr. Gambino, I do, right? Like, I like my corner store. I'd like it to not catch on fire tonight, right? And so there's this overwhelming hammer blow of pressure that comes in. And by the way, even when the government doesn't talk to you directly, if they're funding the organization that is talking to you, then it's very clear what's happening. And so you come under incredible pressure. And so the whole kind of chain, this whole chain of governments, activists, universities, and companies was corrupted. And then on top of that, people in the companies in a lot of cases made a lot of decisions that I think they're probably increasingly starting to regret.
What was confusing to me was that the government spent so much money on these activist groups during the election, and I didn't understand what purpose that would serve. Like what function would it serve to spend all this money on these activist groups that already support you, supposedly?
Yeah.
Like, are you bribing them to support you? Are you paying them to go on talk shows and consistently repeat the government's message, the current administration's message? Like, what would be the function of that?
So I think in some cases it's just pay to play, right? So for as an example, we know that Kamala's campaign paid certain on-air personalities, and then there were which it's your point, people were very supportive of Kamala, who then gave her interviews that went really well. And so I think in some cases you just have straight pay to play. That's just how that system works. It's just expected. And then I think you have other organizations like these NGOs and others, activist groups, where they're actually they actually do field activities, right? And so there's maybe there's a get out the vote component, or there's social media influence downstream component, or some other kind of field activity that's happening in support of the election.
I just didn't think that they pay, like, when it's still unclear whether or not celebrities got paid to endorse her. Right? Have you?
They've mixed it up because there's like Oprah said. Oprah says her production company was paid to put on the production, but she was not paid for the interview.
Yeah, whatever.
But it was $2 million,
$2.5 million. It was initially listed as one, and it turned out it was 2.5.
Right, and so
but like, if I have a production company,
right,
and my production company gets paid $2.5 million to endorse Trump,
right,
and then I go, I didn't get any of that money.
Right.
People are like, shut the f up. Yeah. Of course you got. It's your company. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And also, how much does it cost to do an event?
Yes.
How does it cost $2.5 million to put on an event? Like, are you feeding people gold sandwiches? Like, what are you doing? Like, how is that possible?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the fact that it's deliberately obfuscated, of course, is a clue as to
I just
what's
thought
happening.
The really bizarre one was the allegations, and I'd say unsubstantiated allegations. It's been alleged that Beyonce got $10 million, and Lizzo got $3 million, Eminem got $1.8 million. Like, really?
Yeah. I think if you just published all these numbers, these celebrities would all get so mad at each other that then you would learn everything. It's
Eminem got short.
Right. Lizzo's furious right now, right?
Yeah.
Lizzo's probably listening to this right now being like, what?
Well, I wonder if Lizzo's like, I didn't get I would say it, but why haven't they said it? Like, Beyonce has been mum about the whole thing. I think I would probably say, like, I didn't get any money to do that. But that was a weird one, too, because a lot of people thought Beyonce was going to do a concert.
Right.
And she just went out there and talked, and everybody's like, what the f? Because they all came to see a free Beyonce concert.
Yes.
And then she just said, I want to support Kamala Harris. And everybody's like, good. Now, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it, right? Come on. We love your songs.
Yes.
That's what we're here for.
Yes.
I just didn't think that it was even possible that I didn't think a candidate would ever pay for an endorsement.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that it was even alleged.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the even stinkier version, arguably, which is all the social media influencer campaigns now. There's tremendous amount of payola.
That's for sure.
Right.
Because I know people personally who were approached multiple times and offered a substantial amount of money to post things in support of Harris.
Yeah. And I'm pro-capitalism, and I'm happy for them that they get paid, but maybe we should know.
That seems like something you should absolutely have to disclose. It should be like say if I was going to do an ad for, a certain coffee company, Black Rifle Coffee, and I did it on my Instagram, I'd have to say ad. I have to say this is an ad. Yeah. It's a paid ad. Yeah. And that's part of the thing. Yeah. Yeah. Unless it's your company.
Yep.
Like, you're supposed to say, they're paying me to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, the good news with these is we learn each cycle. We learn a lot about how politics works. We learn a lot about how fake it is. We learn a lot about the things we put up with for a very long time. I mean, everybody's always freaked out by whatever the new guy does, but the real scandal in most cases, I think, is just the way the system already works.
It's a sneaky system.
Yeah.
Well, another fascinating aspect of the system that we learned out this time around is the uncontrolled aspect of it, like what Trump called earned media, was much more powerful than anything else.
Yeah.
The uncontrolled version of it. Like, one of the things that, unfortunately for them, mass media or corporate media has done is they've diminished their credibility so much so that, Joy Reid was on TV today talking about saying that Trump was going to shoot protesters and just wild, unsubstantiated, crazy shit.
Yeah.
And the more they do stuff like that, the more that they say things like that, the more it diminishes their impact, and the more it drives people to independent media sources.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the ratings collapse that they've been. They're down to MSNBC is down to 50,000 people in the 18 to 49 demo.
That is so wild.
Which is tiny, right?
It's so crazy.
It's really tiny. So I think that's happening. The Gallup organization has done polls on trust in institutions, including media, for the last 60 years. It's been a steady slide down, and in the last 4 years, it's fallen off a cliff. I think it's real. Oh, there's another study that came out. The kids are now watching a lot less TV. Kids are just giving up on TV. And they're just they're on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and other things. And so I think it's tipping. question I've been asking myself is when will the actual, famously 1960 was the first television election, right? Sort of legend has it, because it was the one where the televised debate really mattered. And if you saw the televised debate, you saw confident Kennedy and nervous Nixon. And if you heard it, you experienced something different.
And handsomeness came into effect.
And vitality and health, and all these things, sort of positive spirit, positive energy. I'm actually not. This might have been the first internet election, or maybe we actually haven't had it yet. Like, I feel like we're really close to the first internet election, but maybe it's not all the way there.
I think this is it.
I think there's an argument that this is it, right?
This was 100% it. And again, I said it before. You have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to thank for that, and Vivek Ramaswamy. Those two just podcasts. That's all they're doing. The smallest podcast, biggest podcast. I messed up. I didn't think I could have got Vivek. I for sure could have got Vivek, and I just didn't. I didn't even think of it. I was too busy just watching everything, just doing what I do. I could have 100% got it. I probably could have got Kennedy too. I mean, they were going at it. They were saying yes. Vivek's team was actually saying yes to everything. I found out after they were saying yes to everything and just figuring it out. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. They were just figuring it out. Those two made it the first internet. And then Trump was like, okay, I guess podcasts, I can do this. Let's go. And then he started doing it. And he started doing it on the high. Like, Vivek was getting wherever he could get in. Kennedy, historical figure in a sense. He was getting in wherever he could get in. But then all of a sudden he was like, I'm a Kennedy. I'm going on Rogan. I'm going here. I'm going there. I'm going there. Trump was going on all the big podcasts right away. Kennedy got on Rogan. I can't believe we haven't seen Vivek on Rogan. I got to be honest. That's wild to me, because they could have an incredible conversation, go back and forth about anything, really. But let's get into the concern power. Now, Klaus Schwab actually said this. This is an old video that I made back in the day when I was covering the World Economic Forum extensively. This is one thing I always, when I'm listening to things going on today, I'm always thinking about Agenda 2030, and this demon verified this for me way back in the day. Not way back, about a year and a half ago. Let's go.
Civil society brings the concern power.
Number 3, civil society. Now, when I heard this, I was like, oh man, look at that. I mean, having a kid just put the weight on me. Look at that jawline on that boy. Oh my gosh. I got to get back to that. But Klaus Schwab was in this interview, and he was talking about the powers that he uses to control things, the powers that they need. They talked about government being direction power, because government can direct people on where to go and what they're going to do. Business was innovation power, because they can be like, hey, we don't sell phones anymore. We only have chips for your brains. What do you mean? You don't want a chip? Oh, I don't know. I don't know how you're going to call your mom. That kind of thing. Or everybody works from home. That kind of thing. And then they had the media, which was reality power. Now, Klaus Schwab didn't say that, but he talked about how important the media was in everything that he was trying to do. And then he talked about academia being the power of truth, which is very interesting, because we've seen, things started to come apart with academia in the past 4 years. And we've started to see like, oh, okay, they can be bought just as well as a politician, if not easier. But civil society was concern power, and this was NGOs. This was the activist groups that Joe Rogan was talking about. And this is a very interesting thing, because you'd ask yourself, why spend $100 million? Well, Klaus Schwab said it. It's concern power. They let the people know what to be concerned about. If they're all really young, an activist group, right? And they get in touch with other young people and they say, hey, man, you got to hear about this Trump guy and what he's going to do to destroy the country. That's what guys like Harry Sisson, let me just show you Harry Sisson. Now, Harry Sisson, admittedly, isn't a part of an activist group, but he is a young influencer. There's a lot of payola there, like Mark was saying, and people picked up on him right away. So I'm not even going to play a clip of the kid. He's just, you can just see how,
So Donald Trump's campaign manager just threatened me.
No, he didn't. But
no, he didn't. Of course not. But that's what this kid is all about. So later on, it was found out that this kid was getting paid by something called Palette Media. And Palette Media was getting paid by the DNC. So it was very interesting that this kid who had this connection to Palette Media, that has this connection to the DNC, was going all out on how great Biden was and how great Kamala Harris was and how terrible Trump was. And people ended up finding, some screenshots of some payments and everything. It's not super verified, but it's out there. So things like that. That's why they pay so much to these activist groups. When I talked about it at the beginning of the episode, I said I did some research before in regards to George Soros, and George Soros has the Open Society Foundation. And that foundation actually, it's the same type of thing, just, government, George Soros. He has the Open Society Foundation. That pays something called the Title Center, I believe. And the Title Center is known to fund something called Students for Justice in Palestine and something called Palestine Legal. So what Palestine Legal does is when Students for Justice in Palestine activate and get all their signs together. You ever wonder how they have all the signs? Ever wonder why they know how to take over a lot or part of a college so quickly? Why do they know how to do that? How do they move so militant-like? It's because they're all trained. Now, it's not everybody. Some people have really good hearts and they really feel for Palestine, of course. 100%. Dave Smith, Jimmy Dore, he's one of them. We had a back and forth about this. But what ends up happening is Students for Justice in Palestine, they have access to about 240 campuses where they can activate. They can use their concern power, activate, have all of these campuses start protesting at the same time, and that shows the people around what to be concerned about. Now, I'm just using that as an example of why would you spend so much money? Well, there's a lot of money to be spent. Now, where Palestine Legal would come in this situation is when those kids inevitably get arrested. Palestine Legal gets their information, goes to the precincts, make sure that they either get out on bail or their charges are minimal, and they represent them. So George Soros was seen through the funnel, and I did the research. There's videos of it. It's a whole funnel, but he is indirectly funding these things. Why? Because just like Joe Rogan was talking about, when he found out that the Democrats used $100 million, they do things that, both organizations I just talked about, Palestine Legal, Students for Justice in Palestine, they do things that Soros doesn't want to be seen doing. The same way these activist groups will do things for the Dems that they don't want to be seen doing. Some things that they actually can't do because they're politicians. There's certain things that they can't do. There's certain, they can't be seen infringing on somebody's First Amendment and things of that nature, freedom of speech. But these other organizations that are just private companies and this and that, they actually can do those things. So that's why they would spend $100 million. Not only does it tell the youth and people of all ages what to be concerned about, but they can also do things that they can't be seen doing. You can't really have an influencer calling Donald Trump all sorts of wild names. You can't have AOC do that. Well, you kind of can, but you kind of can't. You can't get her. She can't go real vile, or else that will go viral. She can't get real crazy. But some guy can. You can't have her and Nancy Pelosi or whoever protesting in front of some place where, Trump's courthouse. You can't have actual government people doing that. They can't be protesting. That would look so crazy, But they can pay an activist group that actually goes out there and protests. They do the things that that they don't want to be seen doing, that they can't be seen doing. So that's why they would pay $100 million. And then when it gets into the celebrities and everything, honestly, I don't know why anybody would think that Eminem would go on a stage and not get paid. I mean, even the videos you've seen of him being just disgustingly woke, talking about Donald Trump gets me riled up, I get so angry and blah, blah, blah. All these things he's saying, it's crazy to think that he's not getting paid to do all that. It's so wild to think. Now, I don't know that he is, but I couldn't imagine, I know this for fact. I've worked in film and television. I know how this goes. But also I've heard, even Elon's talked about it, all that happens is somebody comes in who's your handler or manager. You usually have a handler and you have a manager and you have an assistant. All of them are your handlers, really. They direct you on where to go. And they walk in and they say, hey, it'd be really cool if you did this. You know, Trump's really bad. It'd be really cool if you did that. You know? And then if you say no, well, they leave and they come back and they say, hey, you know what? It's like they offered this much money for you to do it. So there's money involved. And it's like a coercion because that's how Hollywood works. These people have sold their souls for money. This is what they operate on, right? So it's not about morals and integrity with these people. It's about money. Like, hey, I know you said you just wouldn't do it, but here's enough money that you can't walk away. Will you do it now? Of course they'll do it. And they know in their head that they're being approached for a second time, maybe a third time. Maybe it's the first time. They just don't care. They know. Okay, somebody wants me to do this. I should probably just do this. You know? It's just the way it goes. Anyway, so the fact that the Dems spent $100 million on these activist groups makes so much sense to me. You know, it's crazy that it's $100 million. That's absolutely crazy. I can't believe that. But you know, that being able to, it's like the reason that George Soros bought 200 radio stations. It's like you don't buy the radio stations because it's a good investment. You buy it because you're going to be able to control what people hear when they're on the way to work and when they're on the way home. And sometimes that's their only free time to listen to anything. So you get to mold their reality. CNN's tanking. CNN's not staying open because they're making enough money to stay open. They stay open because they're a necessary evil. So whoever's behind the scenes says we keep them going because they mold reality. MSNBC, same thing. Like, what are we talking about here? Right to my point, those news outlets do and say the things that the Dems can't be seen doing and can't be seen saying. You can't have some senator, some Democrat senator every day saying the things that Joy Reid says. It's crazy. A lot of things that she says are just lies. They're just made up. The View, same thing. They're reading legal notes now. So a politician couldn't be seen saying that. It would diminish the brand of the Democrats. Although, I mean, you know, that brand is terrible already. But they want to uphold it the best they can. They want to be seen as having the high moral ground, right? Joy Reid doesn't care about that. Joy Reid's like, I'm going to say that Trump is going to shoot protesters. And Whoopi Goldberg's like, I'm going to say that he's going to separate interracial couples. Joe Scarborough's like, he's going to kill people, you know, just with no mercy. They're all screaming he's Hitler, you know, fake Tappert. He's saying his stuff, you know, it's all the same type of thing. Now, obviously, these activist groups are not CNN and, you know, CNN, MSNBC. They're not NGOs. They're not activist companies per se, activist organizations per se, but they operate they accomplish the exact same tasks, which is the concern power that Klaus Schwab was talking about. And it's funny that, you know, I haven't talked about Agenda 2030 in a long time, but it's funny that the same thing that they're concerned about and spending hundreds of millions of dollars on is the same thing Klaus Schwab's concerned about to execute Agenda 2030. Just saying. That's my TED Talk. I'll take off the tinfoil Speedo now. Okay? That's it. I'll put some pants on. Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, helps the channel tremendously. And other than that, I'm out.